Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome to HandsomeSassage, where we review all your favorite horror games. For a few weeks in October and sporadically throughout the year, I guess. In this final week of October, I'm looking at the 2010 independent horror game Amnesia The Dark Descent. Amnesia was Frictional Games' first project after the averagely received Penumbra series. Development actually began during production of the third Penumbra game, with this small team of developers juggling both projects. The game went through many changes during development thanks to a host of issues and financial insecurity, including the complete removal of a combat system. The game was released on September 8th, 2010, and sales started off slow, which Frictional Games would claim was due to the lack of a third-party publisher. However, the game would explode in popularity with help from a certain Swedish man and usher in a new credibility to independent games, a movement that is still very alive to this day. Before there were games like Outlast, Five Nights at Freddy's, and Poppy Playtime, there was Amnesia The Dark Descent. Does the catalyst of the indie horror revolution deserve its reputation and withstand the test of time? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's give it everything we've got! The game begins with someone saying, "Don't forget," and given the title of this game, I don't think that's going to go too well. He says there is a shadow hunting him, his name is Daniel, and he lives in London. And there's something off about this, but I'll let Conan say it.
I have amnesia, but I know it's 1839, my name is Daniel, and I'm in Prussia.
Yes.
Those are things that if you have amnesia, the first questions they ask you is, what year is it, what's your name, and where are you?
Daniel here is our protagonist, and his first order of business is following a weird trail of pink stains that lead him to a lantern just chilling on the floor. The lantern is the most crucial part of this game. It's like the camera from Outlast, but much more important. See, Daniel has the mental stability of a little kid on Xbox Live.
Fuck you, bitch! You little bitch! What did I do to you?
So his sanity decreases real fast whenever he's in the dark or sees monsters. Not that there's monsters in this game or anything. That's where the lantern comes in, as having it on will prevent Daniel's sanity from lowering and help restore it. However, the lantern requires oil to work, which you will find sporadically throughout the castle, so you have to be conservative with it. You'll also find tinder boxes around the castle that can be used to light other lamps or candles you find. Along with the lantern, Daniel finds a note from his younger self telling him to descend to the Inner Sanctum of the castle and kill Alexander of Brennenburg, though a reason is never given. He also mentions that there's a living nightmare shadow following Daniel that he can only run from, and you'd really think he'd lead with that. Progressing forward with a nonchalant attitude you wouldn't expect to see in someone who just found out they're being stalked by an immortal enemy of darkness, Daniel has a flashback to Alexander telling him the Inner Sanctum is through the refinery, but his path is being blocked by a weird flesh wall. What, your house doesn't have those? With no choice but to go into the archives, Daniel finds a note from himself detailing his expedition into the tomb of Tin Hanan, a 4th century queen in modern day Algeria. Like basically every horror game I've talked about this month, 95% of this game's plot is conveyed through completely missable notes, and I'll do my best to explain it all when appropriate. The second part of his diary mentions that he got trapped in a chamber, and the third is revealed in a special cutscene.
My weakened body was heavy to carry, but I managed to push myself toward the enchanting light. It was waiting for me. Enclosed in dark nothingness, I felt myself drawn to the mystic light.
While not clear just yet, that orb is the center of this entire game, so keep it in the back of your mind for now. Eventually, Daniel finds a key to the wine cellar, and oh fuck that. Now is a good time to mention just how perfect the atmosphere is in this entire castle. I can't accurately capture it in this video, but every single room and hallway feels oppressive and unnerving, and getting the note that tells you you're being stalked by a shadow always keeps you on your toes. It's expertly done. And while Outlast's Mount Massive relied on psycho inmates, graphic visuals, and excesses of violence to be as scary as it was, Brennenburg Castle relies on medieval architecture, sound design, and scarce candlelight that could be hiding any number of nightmares. That's not to say that Amnesia doesn't have its fair share of disturbing visuals, though. Down in the wine cellar, Daniel finds the remains of a group of men Alexander trapped and poisoned down there, along with... Nope. Daniel favors the "if I can't see them, they can't see me" approach. It doesn't stop him from engaging in some advanced chemistry to create a substance capable of dissolving the flesh wall, though. He does so by using ingredients he finds scattered around the wine cellar, because putting harmful chemicals next to your drinks is just saving space. Making his way into the very dark refinery, Daniel once again has an encounter with one of the shadows and pulley systems his way into the cellar archives, because every cellar needs its own archives. Ah, sweet, at least it's light down here. Never mind. Well, that won't stop me from— oh shit, that will definitely stop me! There is an invisible monster in the water that will chase after and attack you if you're in the water as well, so Daniel has to jump across a series of conveniently placed crates to navigate through this place. The enemy is known as a Cairn, or Lurky to Frictional Games employees, and its concept art looks like this. Oh no! It's not too big of a threat, as Daniel can toss other objects in the water to distract it, and it can even be killed if something heavy is dropped on it. Speaking of can be killed, this is really the first time Daniel is in any real danger, as all of the other encounters were scripted events. There is a health system in this game, as health can be restored with laudanum, which is also quite rare. Despite the fact that the creature is, you know, invisible, Daniel's sanity will still drop if he looks at it. Luckily, we have an infinite supply of Daniel-sized crates to hop on. Daniel has to run from the Cairn in an actually terrifying and effective chase that Outlast 2 could learn a lot from. Daniel escapes from the Cairn and enters the back hall, which is probably the most calming area in the game. You know the bar is low when it has this fountain. Daniel tries to take an elevator farther down, but this is a horror game, so the elevator isn't working. He has to find 3 valves to fix it. The first order of business is to go into storage to retrieve a drill part and fuck. Allow me to take this time to share with you the absolutely terrifying sound that plays when a monster spots you in this game. These things are called gatherers, and they look like this. Hey man, why the long face? But no slack-jawed jackoff is going to stop Daniel from assembling a drill to mix volatile substances to create an explosion that allows him to access 2 of the 3 steam valves for the elevator, all while hearing memories of a girl trying to run for her life.
Please, let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear. I just want to go home.
Yeah, this game is constantly weird. It occasionally suffers from the Resident Evil problem of feeling more like a puzzle game than a horror game, but most of the puzzles are easy to solve and the entire solution is usually laid out for you right away. Now that Daniel has 2 of the steam valves he needs, he can head back to the crap. And we're in a dead-end corridor. This is not good. Luckily, these gatherers are only gathering unearned wages since they suck at their day job, and Daniel can return to the hub with relative ease. The next area Daniel has to explore in this section of the castle that can only be accessed by going through cellar archives attached to a refinery is the guest room, because the design of this place makes no sense and it will never try to. Daniel finds a key to the machine room and the game decides to turn its fuckery up to max as a gatherer begins to break down the door to the room Daniel is in, forcing him to hide in a closet and pray to any and all gods. This game doesn't have a specified hiding mechanic like Outlast, though it does mention that the monsters will not spot Daniel if he's in a dark room or hiding in a dark spot. The gatherer doesn't do more than a basic scan of the room before piecing out because, like I said, they suck at their day job, allowing Daniel to stroll right on into the study. The game says that the shadow is following you everywhere, but that's not reflected in the gameplay. The gatherers only appear in scripted areas, and half the time they are just hallucinations, so there's no way of telling, so you should probably avoid them just to be safe. Danny does some hardcore parkour like his name was Nathan Drake to get the final steam valve and a note detailing how to activate the elevator. Like I said, the puzzle solutions are just given to you most of the time. With all of the pieces in hand, Daniel spends way too long fixing the elevator and way too many steps because game design, and descends down the elevator. Also, he is picking up more of his diary pages all the while, and they detail his research into the orb he found and how everyone he asks to help him investigate winds up dead soon after. But I'm sure it's not connected. The elevator brings Daniel into the prison, in case you needed more hints that some shady shit was going on down here. More on that later though, Daniel finds a hole in the ground which detached voices tell us was used as an escape route when this prison was inhabited. He then finds a hammer and a chipper to make the hole Daniel-sized, all while avoiding another gatherer. The hole brings Daniel into another section of the prison because that prison escape was attempted without the help of Michael Schofield, and he has to gather a cup of acid that's just sitting out in a room full of dead meat because sanitary standards, and brings it to a no, he does not bring it to you, though I imagine it would be a pretty effective counter. Shame Daniel prefers the good old game of hide and pray to God. The acid is actually for this lock, and once Daniel gets past it, he enters the cistern. Cisterns are giant holding tanks for water, so does that mean this place is usually filled to the brim with water? How strong are these doors? Since this game needs to game, the pathway that descends further into the castle is flooded with water and home to a poisonous fungus. Shame there aren't any fun guys in this game, or else I'd be able to make a really bad joke. Up in the control room, Daniel is presented with the most vague puzzles in the game. No instructions are given, and it's up to you to piece everything together. You have to get weights to perfectly match the weights in the opposite room, lower a pump, that part's easy, and gather a series of very easy to miss pipes to place it to a specific pattern in a wall. In the grand scheme of puzzles in games, this is pretty easy, but in this game where every puzzle has been basically been, here's the solution, now just do it. This is pretty much on the opposite end of the spectrum. Completing these allows Daniel to access a morgue. Don't question why a morgue is connected to a cistern, just accept it. In the morgue, Daniel finds the body of a man who was given the fungi vaccine and just injects some of his blood into himself because that's safe. I may not be anti-vax, but I'm definitely anti-that. After straight injecting a random dead guy's head blood into his veins without any kind of research or compatibility test, Daniel heads into another area of the cistern where he drains the water blocking his path. Along the way, finding diary entries about Alexander reaching out to help Daniel with his problem, and his discovery that the shadow is hunting him down as a result of him taking the orb. He also notes that Alexander is more concerned with harnessing the orb's power than saving Daniel from the shadow. With the water drained and Daniel apparently vaccinated, he now heads into the sewers. Oh joy! Daniel looks to progress forward, but you already know the path is being blocked by some arbitrary bullshit to force the player into exploring more, but hey, at least if Daniel pees himself, he won't be noticed. Daniel has better things to be doing than going to the bathroom though, like slowing the wheel and using a pipe to break that shit. Progressing further, Daniel comes across a room covered in breathing, fleshy sacks that have been shown all over the castle, which is emblematic of the Shadow's arrival, and the severed pieces of a gatherer that allow you to enact some level of revenge for how much they've terrorized you all night. Leaving this room, Daniel will be chased by another gatherer, who probably isn't too happy that his brother, sister, mother, father, cousin, friend, however these creatures are related, is dead, but Daniel escapes with the power of very slow ladder climbing. But I thought Daniel was trying to go down. This game isn't called Amnesia The Dark Descent. Regardless, the ladder brings Daniel into the nave, the fourth and final hub area of the game, but there's still quite a lot to do. Down here, Daniel finds the only other human in this entire game, even though he may not look it. This is Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, another person who has had the shadow hunt after them, but he was spared for unknown reasons. He's been tortured by Alexander and requests that Daniel create a potion for him so that he can survive having his head cut off. He then wants Daniel to toss his severed head into the portal Alexander plans on opening. This choice is actually up to the player, as you can completely ignore Agrippa's request, though it is reflected in the ending of the game. Along with deciding whether or not to fulfill Agrippa's request, Daniel also has to find all of the scattered orb pieces in order to gain access to the Inner Sanctum where Alexander is. The first location this brings Daniel to is the transept and all of its lovely torture rooms. The forms of torture practiced here are strappado, where the victim's arms are tied and suspended behind their back, resulting in dislocated shoulders and possibly broken arms, paralysis, sexual assault, and death, depending on who's performing it. Death by sawing, where the victim is suspended upside down and sawed from the crotch to the head, which just low blow. Then there's the Judas cradle, where whichever hole the victim has is lowered onto the tip of the triangle and either suspended there or weighted down lower and lower. Man, medieval times were scary. There is a reason for all of this though. Alexander is torturing people to obtain vitae, a substance secreted by mammals during instances of high stress. Speaking of vitae, it is one of the ingredients to the potion Agrippa wants Daniel to make, and it can be obtained in the saw room. Next up on the list of fun, happy fun rooms of playtime fun is the choir, or as I like to call it, easily the scariest part of the entire game. The choir is a massive room that is almost pitch black and filled with brutes, faster and deadlier versions of the gatherers that have been hunting Daniel all this time. Avoiding them is pretty easy since hiding in the plethora of dark spaces is very effective, but it doesn't make their presence any less terrifying, especially with Daniel's limited field of vision. The choir is also home to 3 more torture chambers with their own orb pieces. This time we've got the Iron Maiden, which everyone knows as the forced stabby bad time coffin, a torture wheel that the victim would be tied to and then beaten, burned, and anything else the torturer would like, and the brazen bull, where the victim is trapped within a large bronze bull with a fire lit under it so they burn alive. And people think waterboarding is inhumane. Outside the brazen bull room is also where Daniel will find the next ingredient for the potion, a strange blue mushroom thing. Only good things can be made with blood and mushrooms. The third ingredient is obtained by taking a piece of meat that's just sitting in the nave and lowering it down a well. It will be consumed by a Karnak, and the residue on the bone is what Daniel needs. With all of the orb pieces in hand, Daniel can enter the chancel, not the first impossibly large room in this castle, but certainly the last. Daniel can enter this room at any point while in the nave, but there's not much to do without the orb pieces. With them though, he enters to see right where I need to go? Seriously? This is actually a scripted event, as Alexander uses the gatherers to capture Daniel and lock him in a cell so that the shadow can consume him. He doesn't think to have the gatherers take Daniel's orb pieces though. Daniel escapes from the cell and the room as a whole, And the Shadow doesn't seem to like that too much, so it's time for Daniel to embrace his inner Barry Allen and run as fast as his cursed legs will carry him. Daniel emerges back in the nave and has a flashback that talks about how he helped Alexander with the ritual, aka all of the torturing. The infection of the Shadow opens up the lab Daniel needs to create the potion for Agrippa, thanks Shadow, and he can then give him the potion and cut off his head. Or he can ignore this whole thing and just head straight back to the chancel and avoid some more gatherers on his way to the Inner Sanctum. Outside the Inner Sanctum, Daniel finds his final diary page that explains his entire motivation for drinking the amnesia potion and desiring to kill Alexander. Alexander had reached out to Daniel with the facade of wanting to help him deal with the Shadow, when in reality he just wanted to use the power of the orb to become more powerful himself. He forced Daniel to torture and murder people in the name of saving himself, but eventually Daniel realized the truth behind Alexander's motives and the monster he turned Daniel into. Daniel then swore to kill Alexander and redeem himself. With nothing left to do but complete his quest, Daniel heads into the Inner Sanctum to finally face Alexander. And by face Alexander, I mean knock over some pillars. That's the entire climactic encounter this game has been building up to. Actually, there are 3 different things Daniel can do here. He can let Alexander open a portal and escape, completely invalidating the whole game, which is a good thing no game ever took that approach. He can knock over the pillars and kill Alexander, thus escaping the castle and the Shadow, or he can wait until Alexander opens the portal and toss Agrippa's head into it. He will be revived and save Daniel from death while Alexander will die. Fun fact, each ending gives you parts of a secret code that can be used to access a secret file in the source code that has a bunch of behind the scenes stuff like concept art and story outlines. And that's the end of the game, no matter which path he chooses. It's hard to convey just how perfect this game's atmosphere is. Every music cue, sound effect, and ambient noise is perfectly captured and implemented to constantly keep you on the edge of your seat and never feel safe. Yes, there are safe hubs that you go between, but the medieval architecture and decor still unsettles you and makes you not want to stick around any longer than you have to. Much like the camera in Outlast, the lantern adds so much to the gameplay. You need it to progress, but oil is a very limited resource, so no matter how much you don't want to walk through that death chamber, you're running out of oil, so you have to. All of the enemy designs, all 2 of them that you can actually see, are effectively unsettling, which is helped tremendously by that shrill detection sound that sends a shockwave through your whole body the second you hear it. However, not everything in this game is perfect. I feel like the tinder boxes aren't really that important. I ended up using a few whenever I found a small room that I could take a breath in without wasting oil, but I still ended the game with like 20 in my inventory. Also, the entire game from the get-go is building up to the confrontation between Alexander and Daniel, but no matter what ending you get, the confrontation is less than satisfying. Amnesia The Dark Descent gets a 7 out of 10. An incredibly solid and effective horror game with a bit of an anticlimax that is limited by the small development team and their technology at the time. It has inspired much better horror games, which works both for and against it. Our all too familiar relationship with horror games that essentially begin in August is over, so next week we explore uncharted waters and see what we discover. I hope to see you there.